Sigmund Freud, one of the most influential figures in the history of psychology. From his early years in Moravia to his radical theories on the human psyche, we will take a closer look at his life, his struggles, and his enduring legacy. Join us as we explore the unusual and exceptional life of the father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud. Chapter 1. Early Life. Freud was born in Moravia in the Austrian Empire on May 6, 1856. He was born with a rare birth anomaly, caul, a piece of membrane that can cover a newborn's head and face but could be harmlessly removed. Despite what some might assume, his mother Amalia's reaction to the sight was not one of distress, but rather the opposite. She believed the folklore that says cauls herald the birth of a child destined for great accomplishments, and for that she was elated. Being the firstborn of 8 children, Freud was his mother's favorite, her golden Siggy, as she would affectionately call him. Unlike his bond with his mother, his relationship with his father was not as positive. Twice divorced prior to marrying the much younger Amalia, Jacob Freud was a wool merchant, but not a rather successful one, facing dismal financial struggles. They lived in a rented room of a locksmith, which served as Sigmund Freud's birthplace and his early childhood home, prior to their relocation to Vienna, when Freud was only 4 years old. Freud's most disappointing memory of his father was an incident where he describes his father to have been passive and meek in the face of anti-Semitic insults hurled at them. Despite it, however, Freud contributes his sense of humor, the skepticism before life in certitude, his liberalism and free thought to his father. These conflicting views eventually led to his need to seek out more powerful father figures later in his life. Chapter 2. Education. From a young age, Sigmund Freud showed a remarkable aptitude for learning. His passion for language and literature led him to become fluent in an impressive 8 languages, including English, French, German, Greek, Hebrew, Italian, Latin, and Spanish. At just 17 years old, he enrolled in medical school at the prestigious University of Vienna, where he delved into the field of neurology. During his studies, he also explored zoology under the tutelage of renowned German zoologist and anatomist Karl Claus. Fascinated by the reproductive system of eels, Freud spent weeks dissecting hundreds of them, hoping to uncover the mystery of their male gonads. Though inconclusive, his research paved the way for further study on this enigmatic subject. In 1877, Freud moved to German physician and physiologist Ernst Bruck's physiology laboratory, where he spent 6 years comparing the brain anatomy of humans and various other animals, a research that proved seminal for the subsequent discovery of the neuron in the 1890s. After graduation, he worked as a physician in Vienna General Hospital. It was during this time that he began to research the field of psychology, but not before becoming acquainted with a rather addictive drug. Chapter 3. Addiction. Freud's research work in cerebral anatomy got him in close contact with cocaine, a drug which even at the time was widely considered useless and thought to be dangerous. Freud, however, saw cocaine as the latest, newest miracle drug, one that had magical pain-relieving properties. In 1884, his fascination led him to publish an influential paper on the palliative effects of cocaine. However, like many in that time, for his research, he became his own guinea pig, very willingly. He loved the euphoria he felt from taking the drug and soon fell victim to an intense addiction, one that would cause him many medical issues. Some credit part of his research on psychoanalysis to his experiences on cocaine, and his book The Interpretation of Dreams was a result of it. It was only after having almost killed his patient Irma, a result of a botched surgery conducted by his colleague Wilhelm Fliess, which went awry, ending with the patient having her nose stuffed with cocaine and gauze, an account he detailed in his book, Did Freud Finally Stop Using the Drug? Chapter 4. The Birth of Psychoanalysis. In 1885, Sigmund Freud traveled to Paris on a 3-month fellowship with famous French neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot, who was conducting a rather interesting research on hypnosis. Charcot's research into hysteria and the susceptibility of patients to hypnosis played a significant role in setting the enthralled Sigmund Freud down the path of psychopathology. Back in Vienna, he adopted a rather different variation of hypnosis in his clinical practice, one that was used by his friend Joseph Breuer. The unusual case of Breuer's patient Anna O., a woman suffering from paralysis of her limbs and anesthesias, as well as disturbances of vision and speech, was a transformative experience for Freud. Breuer observed that patient Anna O.'s symptoms reduced or disappeared after she described them to him. She called it the talking cure, which Breuer later referred to as the cathartic method. Freud was deeply fascinated by this unique treatment, which led to both he and Breuer publishing their discussions of Anna O. and other case studies in their 1895 book, Studies in Hysteria. The foundation for psychoanalysis was set. After numerous inconsistent results, Freud gave up on hypnosis, yet he could not argue with the consistent and effective symptom relief that was achieved by encouraging patients to talk freely, without censorship or inhibition, about whatever ideas or memories occurred to them. A procedure he called free association. The basis of Freud's work was that the layered unconscious mind was responsible for repression, which ultimately led to the symptomatic problems faced by his patients, for which in 1896 he devised a clinical method of deducing, which he dubbed psychoanalysis. Chapter 5. Recognition. In 1902, Freud achieved his long-standing aspiration of becoming a university professor, along with which came conferred recognition and prestige, without salary or teaching duties. His work and his lectures garnered the attention of many intellectuals, starting mostly from a small group of Viennese physicians, to later growing to a congress that held in its ranks a bevy of great thinkers from Carl Jung, Ernest Jones, Carl Abraham, Max Edingen, a congress known as the International Psychoanalytical Association. The International Psychoanalytical Association's aim was to create new psychoanalytic groups, conducting research, a forum for presenting papers on clinical and theoretical topics, developing training policies, and establishing links with other bodies. However, some members withdrew from the IPA, notably Adler, Jung, and even Rank, deviating from Freudianism to start their own schools of thought. In a paper titled The History of the Psychoanalytic Movement, initially published in Jahrbuch, Freud provided his perspective on the origins and development of the psychoanalytic movement, including Adler and Jung's departure from it. In 1930, Freud received the Goethe Prize in recognition of his contributions to psychology and German literary culture. The Nobel Prize Committee also revealed that Freud was nominated for 32 times for the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, but never awarded one. Chapter 6. Escaping the Nazi Regime. In January 1933, when the Nazi Party took over Germany, they burned and destroyed Freud's books. But Freud was far from deterred. "What progress we are making," he told his friend, the then president of the International Psychoanalytical Association, IPA, Ernest Jones. "In the Middle Ages, they would have burned me. Now, they are content with burning my books." Initially, Freud remained in Vienna despite the increasing Nazi threat, even after the annexation of Austria by Nazi Germany and the outbreaks of violent anti-Semitism that followed. It was only after the arrest and interrogation of his daughter, Anna Freud, by the Gestapo and the urging of his friend Ernest Jones, that Freud decided to leave Austria. Jones flew to Vienna from London to persuade Freud to seek exile in Britain, which he eventually did. Jones also used his influence to expedite the granting of immigration permits for Freud and his family. The departure from Vienna began in stages throughout April and May 1938, and Freud's family and relatives left for Paris and London. By the end of May, arrangements for Freud's own departure had become stalled due to the Nazi authorities' legally tortuous and financially extortionate process of negotiation. Finally, Dr. Anton Sauerwald, who was appointed to manage Freud's assets, intervened and helped Freud's family by removing evidence of Freud's foreign bank accounts and arranging the storage of the IPA library. Though Sauerwald's intervention lessened the financial burden of the Reich flight tax on Freud's declared assets, Freud had to turn to Princess Marie Bonaparte to make the necessary funds available to pay other substantial charges. Sauerwald finally signed the necessary exit visas for Freud, his wife Martha, and daughter Anna, who left Vienna on the Orient Express on the 4th of June and arrived in Paris the following day. They stayed there as guests of Marie Bonaparte before traveling to London, where they established their new family home in Hampstead at 20 Maresfield Gardens in September 1938. Freud continued to see patients there until the end of his life. Chapter 7. Last Days. Genius often comes with the side effect of obsession and addiction, and Freud was not an exception. His tendency to gravitate towards addiction manifested through numerous vices. The one that cost him his life was smoking. Freud was 24 when he first started smoking cigarettes, a habit that would soon evolve to him switching to smoking cigars, 20 per day. In February 1923, Freud discovered a benign growth called leukoplakia in his mouth, which was linked to heavy smoking. He initially kept this information to himself, but in April of that same year, he confided in Ernest Jones and informed him that the growth had been removed. Freud sought medical advice from dermatologist Maximilian Steiner, who advised him to quit smoking and downplayed the seriousness of the growth. Later, Felix Deutsch examined Freud and revealed that the growth was cancerous, which he referred to as a bad leukoplakia. Deutsch suggested that Freud stop smoking and undergo surgery to remove the growth. Freud went to see rhinologist Marcus Hajek, who he had previously questioned, and Hajek performed an unnecessary cosmetic surgery. Freud experienced significant bleeding during and after the procedure and may have narrowly avoided death. Deutsch saw Freud again and concluded that further surgery was needed, but he did not reveal that Freud had cancer because he was concerned that Freud might want to end his own life. By mid-September 1939, Freud's cancer had become inoperable and was causing him unbearable pain. The last book he read, Balzac's La Peau de Chagrin, led him to reflect on his own declining health. A few days later, Freud turned to his doctor and friend, Max Schur, reminding him of their agreement not to leave him to suffer unnecessarily. Schur assured him that he had not forgotten, and Freud asked him to speak to his daughter Anna about it. Schur convinced Anna that keeping Freud alive was pointless, and on 21 and the 22nd of September, he administered doses of morphine that resulted in Freud's death at around 3 a.m. on the 23rd of September, 1939. 3 days after his death, Freud was cremated at Golders Green Crematorium in North London, with Harrods serving as funeral directors, as per the instructions of his son, Ernst. Funeral orations were given by Ernest Jones and the Austrian author Stefan Zweig. Freud's ashes were placed in the Ernest George Columbarium at the crematorium in a sealed ancient Greek bell crater painted with Dionysian scenes, which he had received as a gift from Marie Bonaparte and kept in his study in Vienna for many years. After his wife Martha passed away in 1951, her ashes were also placed in the urn. In 2014, a group of thieves attempted to steal the urn with Freud's ashes, and it sustained some damages, and it is now under a protective cover in the Ernest George Columbarium. Despite facing numerous challenges throughout his life, Freud persisted in his pursuit of understanding the human psyche and left a lasting legacy.